Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Richard Skipper celebrates the best in entertainment. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. What are you celebrating today? For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. My show is all about celebrating art, celebrating artists, celebrating life, because I believe that there is so much to celebrate, yes, even in these very dark days, if we only take the time to do so. And I am so very excited because today I get to celebrate my dear friend, Ken Billington, who we haven't seen each other in quite some time. And of course, because of his busy schedule, my busy schedule, COVID and everything in between. But here we are virtually today. And when I asked him to do this and our schedules, we've been back and forth, but here we are. And Ken, before we jump in and we talk about your life and your career and everything in between, I want to ask you, what are you celebrating today?
What am I celebrating today? Celebrating today, I went to the New York Public Library at Lincoln Center. I am doing something for the Legacy Project for the Actors Fund. And I did the first opera Hal Prince directed, which was an opera called Ashmedai. And there's no pictures of it. And I was in the collection at the library looking at found the pictures that Fred Fell had taken of that. And then Doug Rasad, who is head of the theater division, we spent 2 hours crawling through backstage at the library in the collections and celebrating the theater, celebrating the love of the theater and all those people who work so hard, who have their life's work at the library. So younger generations and other people can look at it and celebrate what we do in showbiz. That's what I did today.
Well, I'm glad you're doing that. But we're getting a little bit of an echo here. Do you have anything else that's open?
Well, you know, I see if that solves it. Did that solve it?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Can you hear it now?
Yeah. Yes. No. I think that took care of it.
Yeah, my assistant is in the other room and he was watching. So
okay. Well, I'm glad that he's watching. Ken, I know that you are a New Yorker, born and bred right up across the river from where I live in White Plains, New York. Where did even though you live in close proximity to New York, there are many people who live in close proximity to New York that were not bitten by the bug. Where did that begin for you?
I grew up, I was born in White Plains and I grew up in Rye and Harrison, New York. And where the bug, it was a fourth grade play. I turned the lights on and off for the fourth grade play. It's a longer story than that. But anyway, suffice to say, I did it, got applause. The audience, the grammar school cheered at my blackout. And I thought it was cool, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I honestly have wanted to be a lighting designer since I was in the fourth grade. And however old you are then, that's pretty young. And I've never really wavered much. I went from there and, Cub Scouts and the stage crew and the community players and, all those things one would do. Nobody in my family was ever in the arts. So, it's what I wanted, and I wanted to do it. That's all I wanted to do. If somebody said I couldn't do it anymore, I don't know what I would do. It would be, I'd be hard pressed.
Well, I want to ask you, did you ever have any desire to be on the other side of the footlights?
Not at all. I, when I do lectures or I speak or I do keynotes and stuff like that, everyone asks me that. Oh, you're so good. Why don't you do that? And I don't know if I'm good at it or not, but it may be because I love what I do and I can grab other people and bring them along. No, I don't know how actors remember the words. I still don't know how they do that.
Well, I mean, what was it about lighting design that attracted you immediately at such an early age? And when did you become aware that this was a path that you could actually embark upon?
Um, I, I don't know. I was fascinated by the lights. I was just fascinated. It was fascination. It was nothing more than that. And in the backyard, I was always re-aiming the floodlights. The trees looked great. You'd fall down, break your neck because you couldn't see the pathway, but it looked pretty overhead. And so it was just something I loved doing. I don't know what about it did it for me. And how I realized it was a profession when I did community players. I lit 10 Little Indians. I can't remember if I was in the 9th or 10th grade, I honestly, or the 8th grade. It was sometime in that period of my life. And the director was a fellow by the name of Phil Mathias, who was a Broadway production stage manager. And he was married to Alice Hammerstein, and they lived up in Harrison, and he decided to direct the community players. And he had only worked with like Joe Melziner and the great Broadway designers because he was a Broadway guy. So he treated this kid like a Broadway designer. And that's when I realized it was a profession that one could pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And I owe a lot to Phil because he taught me how it all works and how to make it happen. And
Frank Langella talks about in his book that transition from all of a sudden standing in the dark in the wings
right,
and then stepping into the light for the first time. And all of us entertainers and performers know what that experience is like for those of us who
right,
step. There's that transitional moment for all of us. And we only have it once in our lives.
right,
That happens that first time when you step into that magic light and you're in front of an audience for the first time. And it's magical. And then because of COVID in the last year and a half, which we'll talk about now, every person who has had to transition into doing virtual work from home with these ring lights, God help us, we have such an appreciation for what you do. And obviously, this is not what you do, but we do appreciate even more what a lighting designer does, because those are first days for all of us before
right.
we learned about these things.
Before you get by.
Nerve-wracking.
Right. Yeah. No, it's lighting is, I always think, we're very subtle. Nobody really knows we're there. People think it's bad lighting when the follow spot doesn't pick the actor up. Well, no, that's a bad operator. That's not bad lighting. But they don't know what is lighting. Well, the guy was in the dark, so that's the lighting. But it goes much more into it, the storytelling and psychological of what you're trying to do. And as a line designer, I can fool you a lot. I tell you where to look. Actually, what I really do. That you shouldn't be looking stage right. You should be looking stage left, where the leading lady is. And subtly, I turn the lights off stage right, and the lights are stage left. You never even noticed I did that, but you were compelled to look in that area. So, I focus a show of where you're supposed to look, where the director has placed the actors. I can help build the tension just by changing an angle of light. I can tell you it's going to be a comedy because it's bright and pink when the lights come up, and you'll go, oh, this is going to be fun. Or the lights come up and it's one side light and lots of shadow, it might be a little more ominous evening in the theater. So it's interesting of what all the things I can do. I can make you stand up at the end of the show. You know, I put a little bump at the end of a number or the curtain call, and it will, oh, you get that that little energy. You might stand up, and you might but you don't know. Nobody knows I do that, nor should they really, because I always believe going to the theater is a total experience. You go in, you sit down, and you watch a show, and when you walk out of the show, your reaction should be, that was a great show. Now, we can now break it down to say, oh, well, the book was amazing, the orchestrations and the leading lady and the scenery, and there are all these elements that do that. And every once in a while, not always, you get all of those things right, and the audience walks out going, wow, that was a great evening. I always think of one of the best examples of that is the chorus line.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you walk out of there and you've had an amazing, transformative evening of theater, and you don't know why. And it was everybody firing on all cylinders.
Absolutely. It's that alchemy of everything coming together in the evening. I want to go back to March 12th, when everything shut down with COVID. What was your schedule like when that happened?
I was in the middle of tech rehearsals in London for the musical Sleepless, which is based on Sleepless in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't shut down till the 18th. It hit the US before it hit the UK. So we were in tech. We loaded a big musical in, and we were in tech. And we had tech the opening number and done the Sitzprobe. And after the Sitzprobe, we all went into the theater, and it was getting bad. And the producer called everybody together and said, everybody go off into their own departments. Actors go to actors, musicians do whatever. And here is what I would like to propose, the producer. He said, we're going to close down. But he said, what I'd like to do is come in tomorrow morning and do 4 hours and shoot the commercial. So when we come back, we have something to show, as opposed to we're coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody was so nervous about that because we didn't know anything back then. And I remember walking through Leicester Square to get to the flat I had rented, and it was a Wednesday night or a Thursday night at 9 o'clock. I was the only person in Leicester Square.
Wow.
The McDonald's was open and it was empty. Everything else was closed. And when I remember getting on the plane the next day to come back to the US, it was a British Airways flight with crew. There were 42 people on the plane. So Heathrow Airport was deserted. It was actually pretty frightening. I mean, because we didn't know, but we all thought, oh, we'll be back in a few weeks.
Mm-hmm. That's what everybody thought. I mean, even here in New York, I mean, everybody thought just in a few weeks, everything was going to get back together. When did you feel that it was safe to go back and jump back into production? And where is everything now with Sleepless?
Well, Sleepless, we opened. We went back, and interesting, this producer, Michael Rose, did something nobody else had done. He went and found a rapid PCR test. PCR tests now, of course, are rapid. We can get it on any street corner. But he found a company. They were based out of Poland, and he got them to come into London. They had been approved in the UK, and we would be tested every morning. So when we had to go to the theater, everybody, by the way, if you went through the doors of the building, you were tested. And everybody had a PCR test. And if they were negative, we got a wristband and we could go to work. We couldn't leave, though. We had to stay in the theater until the end of our day. So we brought all our food and, bring your sweater with you if the air conditioning is cold. And we teched an entire musical, opened it to rave reviews, sold it out, 1,200 seats with only 400 sold. every social distancing for days, everybody in mask, touchless ticketing. Not one case happened. Everybody stayed healthy. This was August of 2020. So I did a West End musical. It was amazing.
But I mean, the protocols were all in place there because the country, forgive me for going here, that country was more united than we were here.
Yes, but everything was, nobody really knew anything. So, Michael, the producer, went and found this test, and the theater, he and the theater sat down and said, what do we do about protocols? And the theater said, even though everyone's had a test, they have to wear a mask unless they're on stage. So we sat at our tables with masks out in the auditorium. I could never walk up to the director and talk to him. I had to yell down 3 rows. But the orchestra was they were in a loft, but, if they were playing a string instrument, they were masked. If not, they were plexiglass. But that came from the theater and the producer, and it wasn't, nobody else was coming up with these rules yet. I think 6 foot existed and masks existed, but nobody had figured out touchless ticketing. Even when you got to the bar was open, but you had to order online. You didn't go.
Amazing, just amazing. The world of theater has just completely changed right there.
Right, and we did this a year before any other theater opened.
And and where is Sleepless now in terms? Is it planning? Transfer?
Yeah, it did very well. It did very well, and it's good, by the way. Sometimes I do shows and they're not so good. This one was good, and it was given a good production. And what I do know, because I'm back working, is the theater is. I have lots of shows, but nobody knows quite when we're going to do them. I think people are cautious. Obviously, the ones that reopened. New shows, should we wait till the fall? Should we wait till next January? Forgetting the theater problems, just, real estate problems.
Exactly.
And they want to do it, and people are interested over here. I just think it's going to take another amount of time before things level out. I have shows on the road now touring. The Waitress is out touring in the US, but they cancel performances. They cancel bookings if let's say, for example, they're in a town where they can't compel the stagehands to wear face masks, then the show doesn't play there.
Wow.
Which is what it should be, I think, because anyway, so there's all of those protocols, but the road is doing well. I have 2 shows touring in the UK, Chicago and Waitress, both doing very well, and it's that's all started. But there's all the protocols, and I've had a COVID test not every day, but close to every day since the middle of August. Sometimes I do it myself. Sometimes I go have it done. Sometimes it's the fast test. Sometimes it's PCR test. But everyone is, and in the places I have been and worked, and I just did an opera in Phoenix, and I did something out in Santa Barbara. Everything's the same. You're tested daily, and everyone wears a mask, and and generally everyone stays healthy.
Well, that's the whole thing. And I've been boosted and I've had my vaccines, and we move forward.
Right.
I want to go back once again to 10 Little Indians. When you were being acknowledged for be in the theater and everything, and starting to think about a career in this business, what steps did you take early on in your career to pursue a career in the theater as a lighting designer?
Well, what I would do, and on Saturday mornings, there would be children's shows or something that would be booked into the auditorium. It's the high school. And I would always go up and ask the actors in the touring show, they're New York actors, in, whatever the kiddie show was. I remember Stacy Keach was in one of them. But I used to ask these folks, where should I go to school? Hey, and
I did the same thing. That's amazing. I did the same thing.
Mostly, I heard, if you want to go into lighting, you go to Carnegie Tech, which is Carnegie Mellon now.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the 60s, there weren't a lot of places that taught lighting, and that was one of the better ones. And so that's where I applied. I wanted to go, and I couldn't get in. I didn't get in. My SATs were not good enough. So then I just started working as an assistant on Broadway. I took a lighting course on Saturday mornings at a place in New York called Lester Polikoff's School. And it was basically for graduate students figuring out how to pass the union exam.
Mm-hmm.
So I studied there with great teachers of the time, Peggy Clark, a famous Broadway lighting designer, and Tom Skelton, another famous lighting designer. And I just did that. And then I started assisting. When I was 19, I was assisting on Broadway. And that's how I learned.
And as you were, starting to acclimate yourself, when did you begin to branch off on your own?
Well, I assisted on a lot of shows. I was Theron Musser's assistant.
Yes.
And I was with everybody. And I remember I was assistant on not the original company, but the National Tours of Mame and all those shows. And I remember very clearly, we were doing the musical Applause with Lauren Bacall.
Mm-hmm.
And we were out of town. And Theron, arguably, I think the best lighting designers ever lived.
I want to talk about Theron for a few moments as well.
But I remember she was lighting a transition in Applause. And I kept saying to myself, no, it should just be the blue downlight. I started designing that transition in my head, and she wasn't doing that. I mean, what she was doing was absolutely brilliant, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And that's when I said, guess what? If I'm thinking that, working with the most brilliant lighting designer in the world, I got to do it on my own. And that was the end of my assisting career.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started doing it on my own.
Well, I want to talk about Theron Musser for a moment, because how long were you actually with Theron Musser? And I want to ask what you learned from her, that you learned from her, not only as that she has imparted upon your career, that is carried through in your career, and the things that you learned from her that have imparted upon you just as a human being, the life lessons that you learned from her in this business.
Right. Well, things I learned were she was a great artist. She did not suffer fools. I never saw any temperament. She was also level-headed and never raised her voice. I mean, never got mad, never did any of those things. And I watched the collaboration with the other creatives,
Mm-hmm.
sets, costumes, sets and costumes, direction, choreography, and that how she was part of this well-knit family that trusted her, believed in her. And I saw that up close, and she always did good work. And just the attitude and the way to go about it with a cheeriness. Nobody wants a sourpuss in the theater. And everyone's under a lot of stress when you're trying to put up let's say, a musical. And they're expensive, and there's not enough time, and it may be good, it may be bad, whatever it is. The leading lady may be terrible, but there's all these other things. I have to be one clog in that wheel. And I learned from her that I'm an important clog, but I can't the bus can't break down because of me, because the side light doesn't work, or they put the wrong gel in, or whatever it is. I can't have a hissy fit and stand there and stop the wheels moving so everyone can listen to me rant and rave about something we're going to solve anyway. Mm-hmm. And I might as well just solve it on my own. And I just learned that there's no time for that sort of breakdown. So I've never got mad in a theater. I think probably have about 4 times on a long career. There's just no time for it. You just got to get on with it. And
it's good to know that. But when you made up your mind that you were going to branch off on your own, was that an easy transition for you?
It it was easy in saying I'm going to do this. It was not so easy getting work
Okay.
because I had been working on Broadway. I had done like almost 30 Broadway shows as an assistant. So I knew the general managers, I knew the electricians, I knew the producers. I knew all these people. I mean, I would go into Joe Allen's and I would know everybody. So I was a known quantity. I was a
And they
young,
knew you.
and they knew me. But I would run into people at Joe Allen's, and Mr. Producers, go, "Hey, Ken, how are you? I'm great. How's Theron?" So the next thing out was Theron because I was associated with Theron. I didn't mind being associated with Theron, but I wasn't thought of as a designer. And that I got a few jobs, but we weren't going anyplace. And actually, to pay the rent, I took a job being the projectionist at the Theater 80 St. Mark's for the movie musical. So I ran movies and then got a job, and then Theron recommended me for a Broadway show, basically. And I did it. With my first Broadway show was with Hal Prince, and I got a Tony nomination. So then I was a known
Bad. That's not
I
bad
was
at
a known
all.
quantity, and Hal used me. I did 21 shows with Hal Prince. So it was, once I got the break, as it were, it sort of came along. I guess I was doing a good job. Then the thing I've learned over the years, if you're an easy person to work with, you can do an adequate job. If you're difficult to work with and do a brilliant job, nobody wants to put up with that. What they want is the brilliant job from the pleasant person. They will then settle for an adequate job from the pleasant person as opposed to a brilliant job from an unpleasant person. So, because there's just no time. There's no time. And, oh, yeah, but you had a month to tech the show. Yeah, but, did we really have a month? We spent, the first week trying to get the turntable to turn, whatever it is.
How long did it take for you to step outside of that shadow of Theron, where that association was no longer there? Obviously, you'd been working together for so long that people associated the two of you together. How long did it take for you to break away from that
I
association?
think by the time I had done, my first year on Broadway, I did 4 shows, one of which was with Hal Prince. And so by the time and then was at Stratford, Connecticut doing the repertory season, and then did my next Broadway shows with another Hal Prince show. By the time I had done 2 Hal Prince shows and had in a year had done 5 Broadway shows, I was a known entity. So then I was me. People would know me and remembered me from those days with Theron, but they were now thinking me as a designer. So it was, I'm making it sound very easy.
Well, you said earlier that I mean, it was once you made up your mind, that was an easy decision for you to make.
Yeah,
But it took a little while for the work to start coming in. Once the work starts coming in, and you start to get a name for yourself, especially, it's a great thing to have 4 shows on the boards in one season. At what point does your name start to resonate and start to be in people's heads? How long did that start to happen?
I
Did
think
that start to happen immediately?
I think by the time I had done Sweeney Todd, which was the visit was in 73, Sweeney Todd was 79. By the time I was doing Sweeney Todd, I was, a major lighting designer in New York. And I was known as, and I had 4 Tony nominations by then. So it was, I was just one of the guys people knew who was doing a good job, who was just working. So I didn't, I just had jobs. People were calling. The phone was ringing, and not always from people I knew. I remember once Bette Midler called me and said, "I want you to light my act."
Hmm.
And I said, "Why?" And she said, "I saw Sweeney Todd, the best lighting I've ever seen." And I said, "I don't think that's what you want for your act." But,
Maybe it was. It could have.
Anyway, I talked myself out of that job. But, it was, how did she find my phone number? I don't know. I'm in the phone book. So if you wanted to find me, my name's in the phone book.
Right.
And before we had social media and all that, you wanted to find me, look, I was in the phone book. People would call up and say, "Hey, will you like my show?"
Well, what was the process like working with Mr. Prince, Hal Prince? When he came to you with an idea like Sweeney Todd, and you get the script and you start working with it, did you have a lot of freedom to do what you wanted to do? Because the lighting was absolutely phenomenal in that, and it set the tone for that entire show.
The thing that was really interesting about Hal is Hal totally trusted his designers. The thing that I know is he handed Eugene and I a picture of Grand Central Station with the sunlight streaming through the windows and said, "This is a good idea. It should look like this, but let's have shadows." That was all he ever said to me. He didn't say any more. Eugene took that and made a big surround of a foundry to represent the Industrial Revolution, though the whole show takes place on a little revolve in the middle of the stage. And so I sort of did what I wanted to do with those things that we want sunlight through windows and we want shadow. And with that, I lit the show. And an interesting story that when we did the tech of Sweeney Todd, because the set was so big, at the time, it took 3 weeks to load in, which was unheard of on Broadway. Now, they would think that's fast track.
Yes.
That they started tech rehearsal before the set was finished. So they would work, the stagehands would work on the scenery till 6 o'clock. And then the actors would come in at 7, and we would work 7 to 11 or something. And they were staging, but I couldn't light because the lights weren't finished. The set wasn't up. So they managed to tech the show without us lighting the show, which is how we normally do it. As they tech along, they do act 1, scene 1, we're playing along with them. And at some point you get to the end of the show and everybody's sort of done their job. And I hadn't done it. And we were about to do a dress rehearsal and there were no cues written for Sweeney Todd. But I now had the full rig. I had done the follow spots for Act 2 because I finally got them working when they started staging Act 2. And I said, "Oh, gee, I better write a cue to get us started." So at 11:30, we started at 1. At 11:30 in the morning, I wrote the preset, which is what you see when you walk into the theater. And then a guy used to come out and play an organ. And so I did the organ cues. And then there was a blackout, which was on the whistle. And then the lights come up on the Ballad of Sweeney Todd. I did great on the first 3 cues. Blackout was perfect. And then the lights came up and by the way, there's a full orchestra in the pit. There is a full company on stage in costume and makeup. And it looked terrible, by the way. I'm not saying this looked good. And the lights came up, but I had just written it as I was running out to go to lunch. So Hal stopped and he came to the table and said, "Ken." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I know." He said, "I know you haven't had time to light it, but let's do something." So I just, in those days, memory boards were slower. So I took out this, took out this, took out this. And I put a shadow light on the edge of the stage, which was to be used for, at one point in the show, somebody was hung. You saw a noose fall with a body swinging. It was cut. I don't even think we made it through a tech with that. But the last light I turned off was that shadow light, but I turned everything else off. And there was this one light down the edge of the stage, making these giant shadows all over the set. And Hal said, "That's it, kiddo, let's go." And we did. And by the time we went home that day, I had lit the entire show.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Just an amazing.
So, you know, it's just because of the time frame, I had to go fast. And when I found that shadow, it was so I knew where that was for, but I didn't intend for that to set the tone at the beginning. But when I found it, it set it, and off we went, and we sailed through the show. And I never really changed it much.
What was the most challenging project that you've ever had to do lighting for?
It depends. Sometimes, what is the challenge? Sometimes the challenge is, and I can't say any particular show, but sometimes the challenge is there's too much scenery and there's no way to light it. That's a reality. Sometimes there's a director and you don't see eye to eye, or you have a set designer that doesn't like what you're doing and might say bad things about you to everybody. So challenges all come differently. You could get a troublesome star who thinks it should be different on them, you know. And you don't know where a lot of that comes from. It could be the husband or the agent or the best friend coming to see it and saying, "Oh, you look terrible up there. The lighting is awful." Maybe the lighting is perfectly right for the show. Now you have to deal with that personality of the star, who might be selling all the tickets. So the challenges really come from different places. Rarely is it like the whole thing is a challenge. Challenge of time, you know. You know, I remember when we did Dance of the Vampires, the challenge was the scale of the show and to get it done in time. When I did a musical Dream, it was a challenge of dealing with the leading lady. None of this was difficult. It's what I do, but you don't know where those challenges are going to come from. And I've also done shows that haven't been very pleasant because maybe it wasn't very good. You know, and when
You never know. I mean, you never know when you're going to go into something like that. But, and of course, every situation is different. And I realize that it's hard to speak in generalities. But do you have a certain way that has worked for you in terms of how to forge through those challenges?
Forge through is you have to solve the problem. You can't kick the can down the road. You have to solve the problem now. And if it's not a now solvable, like, okay, we need to get a can of paint, whatever it might be, we can't solve that now. But in my mind, I have solved the problem. You go to the director, because the director is the boss. The producer pays the bill, but the director is the boss. You go to the director and say, I know how to solve this problem. I cannot do it today. I'm going to try and get it in tomorrow, but it's probably going to be 2 days from now. And they will stop. They will believe that I know what I'm doing and that we will solve it. In 2 days, I better have come up with a solution. But you can't run and put your head in the hole in the ground. You have to go solve the problem as they arrive, as they appear, and figure it out. And hopefully without throwing anybody else under the bus. But, you know.
Well, when you're brought on for a project, I mean, when you've been working with someone like a Hal Prince, you have a relationship with that person and they know who you are and what you're all about. And they want to obviously work with you and bring your expertise in.
Right.
But when you're dealing with a situation with a leading actress in a certain show, we won't mention names, and it's and there could be a lot of reasons. It could be insecurity. It could be because the leading actress has done the show before and feels that she knows the show better than the people surrounding her. And we know who we're talking about, and a lot of other things. How do you yourself deal with the leading actress, or is it the director's job to do that? How do you get through to those people that are creating the roadblocks?
Well, you have to try and figure out why is this all of a sudden a problem today? What went wrong to make this a problem today? It could be a lot of things too. That show got bad reviews. I mean, who knows what it is. But again, if it's a star, you go up and you try and talk to them. You don't, when they're blowing their top and going off, you can't say anything, to smile.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day go in and say, here's what I've done to solve this problem. I know I was doing a show once, and the leading lady was very upset by what she looked like. Nobody had said she looked bad, but she said, oh, and the light should be there, but start pointing. And rehearsal stopped, and I went right up on stage. You don't yell this from the 8th row. I went up on stage. I took the leading lady aside, and I said, well, let's continue on, and when we get the first break, I'll meet you in your dressing room. So that went fine, and we continued on doing a teching of what we were teching. And the break came, and I truly did go to the dressing room. And I said to the leading lady, I said, part of my career is I design a lot of Las Vegas nightclub acts. And I said, I am the designer for Ann-Margret, for Shirley MacLane, for Liberace, for Sigfried and Roy, Chita, Rivera, Juliet Prowse. And I said, one of the things I do is make them look beautiful. And I said, and I will make you look beautiful. You just have to trust that I know what I'm doing, because I wouldn't have had that career within that side of my life if I had screwed up and made Ann-Margret not look beautiful. I think that would be very hard to do, but I mean, and she calmed down and was fine. And we got through tech, and the next day came out on stage and said, my agent was here last night and said, I've never looked more beautiful. But I went and dealt with it. I didn't let it fester, because if you let it fester, it will blow itself up, and to the point where she's calling the agent saying, get me out of this show or have that person fired.
Mm-hmm.
And none of us like confrontation. We don't live on that. That's not fun. I just want to turn my lights on and off and make it pretty. But sometimes you have to go have those moments and solve the problem from the beginning.
I always say, when I'm working, first of all, I love the collaborative process in the theater. Right. I love working with lighting designers, producers, directors, everyone that's around. And I always check my ego at the door.
Yeah.
And I'm good at that. There's some that aren't. It's like, what do you want? Let's make this work for all concerned. Right. Has there ever been a situation where you have put your heart and soul into something, you do the first preview, and then you realize, what was I thinking? And you start from scratch and reinvent the wheel, so to speak?
Yeah, I did it on one show. It was a review called Perfectly Frank. It was a Frank Lesser review.
Yes.
Directors, and the new director, Ron Field, great director, had a completely different concept from what I had. And being a team player, I jumped on board with his concept. And the show looked bad. By the way, it looked terrible. And I couldn't make it look good. It was just really hard. The show just looked bad.
Was it because of the staging, or was it
because the staging was okay? The physical production was fine. The lighting was not good. Lighting was terrible, actually. And I was struggling. And after like the fourth preview, and the director was angry with the lighting and that it would look so bad. And I said, oh, well, you know what I'm going to do tonight? I'm going to put on my Ken Billington coming in to look at the lighting to see what's wrong with it hat. So I got a seat in the 5th row, and I went down, I sat there and watched, and I looked and said, oh, the color's all wrong. I put all the wrong color in everything, which was a request of the director. So I went to the general manager and said, I want a call tomorrow. I'm going to re-gel the show. And he said, okay. That's an inexpensive thing to do. And I changed all the color. And the blues were still blue, but they were another color blue. The reds, the warms were warm. I didn't radically change it. I took it back to what it had been when we had done the out-of-town tryout. I took the colors back there. And we did the show that night, and the show looked fabulous. And the director in the back of the house, I was standing there, and the house lights came up, and he came over and kissed me on the cheek and said, thank you.
Oh, that's great.
So, you know, I had put the lights in the wrong places. I just put the wrong colors in them. But I was smart enough to know that I screwed up. So let's fix it.
Now, obviously, technology has changed a lot in the theater. What are the things that you love about the changes that have happened since the beginning of your early days in the theater? And what are the things that you miss about those early days in the theater in terms of lighting a Broadway show today?
Well, when I started, it was all manual operation. Then we got computer control, and that's great. And then we got automated lights, and the technology kept improving. But, you know, I was at the library today. I was looking at the model of the original Follies back in someplace in the library. And I do remember Follies being, I think, the best lit show I have ever seen in my life. There was zero technology on it. It was guys pushing levers. There were no automated lights. There was no haze machine. There was nothing. It was simple, brilliant lighting. And I look at that and I remember lighting looked fabulous before we had all the technology. We now have technology. We do it differently. We do it maybe more efficiently. When the director says, oh, shouldn't it all be red now? We can make it red. We don't have to go get the scissors and cut the red gel like we used to have to do. I think that, so what I like better about Another Time is lighting was thought of by the director when they were in rehearsal, and thought of how. You would get a phone call from the stage manager. It would say, oh, in the first scene, Mary enters through the doorway up center and stands in the doorway and does the first monologue, which was a way of saying you probably need to put a special at that doorway because somebody's going to be standing in it. So I would go to my light plot and make sure there was a light focused on the doorway in pink for Act 1. And then you get a phone call the next week from the stage manager saying, they do the same thing in Act 2, but it's nighttime, so you might need it in blue. So I had to hang a second light to get the blue. But the directors knew all this. They knew we couldn't change it on a whim. If you wanted something like that, you had to ask for it up front, as opposed to standing on the stage and say, she's dark at the doorway, and I didn't know about it. Now we got to get a ladder out. We got to find a light. We got to, you know, all those things that go with getting a light for the doorway. Now I can move a light to the doorway. It's not, I put a light there. Oh, you want doorway? Boom. Do you want it pink? It's pink. You want it blue? It's blue. I mean, there's no, that's easy to do now. And I think many directors who didn't grow up in that era, don't know, because they know if they say, oh, she's dark at the doorway, that I can solve it pretty rapidly, like in a minute or so. Back in the 70s, it was a ladder and a gel and a plug and a light and an electrician and whatever to do it. So also tech rehearsals now take twice as long. You know, when I started, and shows used to go out of town, which was great. And when I started as an assistant with these big musicals, we'd go to New Haven, and whatever show was in the theater before closed on Saturday night, they loaded it out on Saturday night. The new musical loaded in Sunday morning. Big new musical. And they'd load the set and the lights in. And by Tuesday, you probably would do the focus of the lights. Wednesday, you would start a tech rehearsal. And Wednesday, you would do Act 1. Thursday, you do Act 2. Friday, you do a dress rehearsal. And you do a performance Friday night. And when I say shows were done that way, My Fair Lady was done that way. Hello, Dolly was done that. That's how shows were done. It wasn't 3 weeks of rehearsal. There was a day for Act 1, a day for Act 2, and then you put it all together. Now, when we want to move a light, we move the light. Everyone stands still, the light moves. Then we have to record that preset. They want to move the winches a little bit. That's all automated. So yes, it's consistent. Every show, it never changes. It just takes longer to get there.
Well, that's show business.
Right.
We're going to wrap up, but before we do, I always end my show with my homage to James Lipton inside the Actors Studio. He always ended his show with his questions. I've got some random questions I'm going to ask you just for the fun of it. And the first question is, what is the best example of someone helping you out in this business?
Someone helping me out is a lot of people help you out. Everyone comes to help you. You know, I remember, this is a perfect example, when I was in Stratford, Connecticut in the 70s as the assistant at the Shakespeare Festival. I went and turned the house lights on. Now, that's a union job. I'm not supposed to touch the house lights. I remember the carpenter coming and screaming at me. And he was teaching me. He wasn't angry. He didn't care if I turned the house lights on, but I'm not supposed to turn the house lights on. So I learned that everyone cares. So that carpenter was teaching me. And everyone teaches you. And I do the same thing.
That's great. What is the one thing that a friend has in this business that you have coveted?
Oh, gee, I don't know. Bigger hits. But I can't say that too loud because I have Chicago running 25 years.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
I'm very happy with what I do. Sure. Would I like more Tony Awards? Of course. Who wouldn't? Would I like, do I wish I had designed Lion King, Hamilton, Chicago, and Phantom of the Opera? Absolutely. But I just did Chicago. So, other people are doing just fine. I wish a big hit on everybody because it's a joy that doesn't happen to everyone.
That's great. When have you listened to a hunch in your career that was right on?
A hunch in my career that was right on. It was a hunch in my career. I was offered a TV show. I knew zero about television. I mean, I really knew nothing about television. It was a production of Dracula starring Frank Langella for HBO. And I took the job. And I finally said and I took the job going, how bad can it be? All they'll do is fire me. And I remember going to the production manager and he said, you'll be fine. Just do what you do. And the hunch that I would figure it out, and if I got into trouble, somebody would help me, was good. And so I had a TV career. I've never really pursued it, but I've done a lot of television. I mean, I did some last month. So I do, but it was the hunch. Don't be afraid. I wasn't afraid.
That's great. Who is the most amazing person that you have learned the most from in this business? And I think I know the answer.
Right. Well, Theron Musser I learned the most from, but also Peggy Clark, who was a lighting designer she was really the third lighting designer. There was Abe Fader, Gene Rosenthal, Peggy Clark, but Peggy was lighting the shows in the 40s and 50s and things like Brigadoon and, Wonderful Town and No Time for Sergeants and Bye Bye Birdie. And the advice that she gave me, because she came from when lighting was not an art form, it was something that was performed by the electrician. And she turned it into basically an art form. And every bit of advice she gave me was like golden. And I still remember it now.
That's great. What is the most outstanding example of wealth that you have ever experienced firsthand in your life?
Wealth,
Wealth,
money-wise.
money-wise.
Well, when I've seen wealth used for good to, I just came back from doing in Santa Barbara a production of Kismet for a wonderful woman who owns a publishing company. It was her favorite show when she saw it as a kid. So for her 80th birthday, she mounted a full production of Kismet. Lonnie
God
Price
bless her.
directed it. But it was her way to support the arts in Santa Barbara. I mean, she gave the symphony a lot of money and they played, and she gave the ballet a lot of money and they danced. And she brought all of us out, and it was giving something back to the community that was real, that you could go see, that something she loved and she thought other people might love it also. And I thought, what a generous act to spend a great deal of money to mount a production of Kismet, not a show that you see every day.
Mm-hmm.
Lovingly with a 40-piece orchestra and all the principals and a full ballet company and Jim Noon's sets and Lonnie Price's direction. And it was a very fancy encores. And it was just heartwarming to see that you can do good stuff with your wealth that makes you can actually sit there and watch the audience smile and enjoy it.
That's wonderful. When were you most pleased with yourself in your profession?
When am I most pleased? When people, that somebody recognizes that I did something well. And I remember doing a production of Inherit the Wind on Broadway with George C. Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big, Jim Noon did the scenery, it was a big wraparound sky. And that Theron came to see it, and she saw me at intermission and said, "See you in the bar across the street." And when we walked in, she turned to me and said, "How did you light that cyc?" She said, "It's the best cyc I've ever seen."
Wow.
And I said, "Exactly the way you taught me." I mean, that to me is the best column. That's why I knew I was a lighting designer.
Round circle. That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. What is the best possible attitude to have in this business?
Can do, and it's fun. By the way, this is a fun job,
Mm-hmm.
and I think people that don't have fun are missing out on so much. Yeah, is it hard? Is it stressful? Yeah, sure. And I also get paid, so that makes it that. But I enjoy getting out of bed in the morning and going off and lighting a show. That to me is just fun, and why not? I mean, I love having fun in my life, so that's fun.
Well, that's wonderful. What would your 18-year-old self think about where you are at this point in your life?
I think my 18-year-old self would be amazed that I did what I wanted to do and did it successfully and made a living at it.
That's great. And this is my last question for you. In what way have you displayed the best taste in your career?
Best taste. Well, I'm terrible at putting Christmas lights up. I'm my best taste is actually working in a theater, lighting a show. I can't draw, I can't paint. I always, I go to see little kids dressed up at Halloween and go, I would never have thought of that. I think, I guess I'm not a creative person, but guess what? I am. When what I'm creative with is lighting, and I think I do a lot of tasteful lighting. I mean, I've done some beautiful stuff.
I would agree with you on that. I want to thank you. Don't go anywhere for just a moment. Ken, I'm such a fan of your work. I'm such a fan of you as a person. I am thrilled that you said yes and that you said that you're here today. I want to thank every single one of you who said yes to coming and being here for the last hour. I know that I can speak for Ken when I say this. Those of us in the theater don't take it lightly. when you take the time to spend an hour or two with us in the theater. So those of you who came by for the last hour, thank you. If this is your first time here, I hope it won't be your last time. I call my show Richard Skipper Celebrates for a reason. I'm all about celebrating. There have been over 350 other artists that have been on this show as well, and hopefully there'll be 350 others. On my Richard Skipper Celebrates page, on my banner, you'll see a little button that says, join in the celebration. Click on that button. I have that button there for a reason. I got rid of the word subscribe because I want everyone to feel that they're part of this. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the show. Share this with your friends. Tell others about this. Let me know who you would like to see on this show, because I want to do this for all of you. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the 9th name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, but a phone call. And let that person know what they mean to you. As my dear friend David Friedman always says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And I always say, if you're going to go out in a boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. So I'm going to leave the screen right now, Ken, and I'm going to give you the final word. Anything that you want to say about anything that we talked about today that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any final message that you want to put out to anyone who's watching right now. You don't have to worry about how to end the show, because as soon as you say goodbye, I know how to end the show. I will end it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the gifts that you've given to the world. And thank you for the gifts that you're going to continue to give to the world. I love you, Ken. You're the best. And keep doing what you do best.
Okay. I'll turn it on. You know, what I have always found is you have to pass it on, pay it forward. People were wonderful when I was starting in the business, and that went out of their way to be nice to me, to, you know, like that stagehand yelling at me for turning the house lights on. That was paying it forward. It was teaching me how to do it. People would answer questions. I would call somebody I didn't know, and they would be helpful. Everybody was really good. And I've always thought those people that helped me, out of kindness, out of love of the art of theater, I need to pay it forward also. So I always talk to young people. I will do anything to make people know that live theater is a bunch of personalities that get together and put on a show. And there's a lot of other personalities behind those that are helping to put it all together also. And that everybody is important. There is not one person in the theater who's more important or less important than you. The usher, because if the usher doesn't get them in their seats, the show doesn't start on time. If the show doesn't start on time, everyone's grumpy and you go into a bad show. If the guy pulls the curtain the right way, it is magical. You know, what is it? It's pulling a curtain. Yes, but you have to be an artist to be able to pull a curtain the right way. So I think we are a great community, and I love it. And people have been so good to me that you have to be good to them. So I'm going to ask you, that some of you are getting started and some of you are already established, pay it forward. It will pay back eventually, and it will make you a happy person. Thanks so much. Thank you, Richard. This was fun, and maybe I'll get to see you in person one day soon. Goodbye, all.